Education, and let's take a look at another case study here. This one I call Hopeless Number 19. This is one of those situations where I adopted it from another doctor's treatment plans, and on my treatment plan sheet, I explain that every doctor is going to have a different opinion and different treatment philosophy, and to seek out second and third opinions on cases. This is definitely one of them where I disagree with what the doctor was thinking he can do or try, which was try to put a Bicon implant here, and this is also a failing 5-unit bridge with the pier abutment failing, and this needed to be cut off right in this whole section. And because of the weird sinus and the bone density, this was also not a good site, and implants had failed down here and up here. The other problem is you can see that there was an extraction here. This is her day one initial CT. This is probably a few years ago. We lost track of the patient, and the patient's recently back, and so we'll do follow-up cases with this case because it does provide some insights as to what is really possible and what could actually happen, and see what we could do to kind of at least get something. But this is a hopeless site, and let's look at the CT and see why. But first, let's look at our treatment assessment and see what we can get out of that first. Okay, so I have a yellow constriction, I have orange in the sinus and the facial bone, and the constriction part of that should also kind of be paralleled into the orange, but I felt a little generous here to give it a yellow, and I'll explain that later. And then we have a red bone density here. When we look at this CT, you'll see how poor the density actually is. That's probably why these implants would have never taken in the first place. So here we go. Let's look at that. Let's look at this number 19 area first. And you can see that this is just an impossible site to deal with. I'm not really sure if anybody out there wants to think that they could do something here, but this is what the actual bone density looks like. The ridge is pretty much shot. It's just a little narrow thing, so that would be also, if you talk about detached gingiva and things like that in this case, it's definitely affected. The nerve is probably up here. If we want to try to track that, here's a simple way that I do it. Is I go to my CT scan and I break it down to millimeter or less, and then I try to track where I see the nerve in the foramen, and then I track it going back. So here's where I see it, and then I see it kind of coming along here, and you can see the channel here. That's our channel. So I know in this number 19 area, if I'm looking at an implant here, that's about where I could go. I can't go any further, and I'll put that right there. So looking at it in tandem, this is essentially the height of my nerve. So my nerve is right in here. Not really anything to work with here, so I'm not really sure what the dentist is thinking about putting a Bicon implant or anything in here. This is definitely a hopeless case, and it's untreatable. If a doctor thinks that they're going to try to build a ridge up, you got to build it pretty high. You're going to have to bring it all the way up, and you have to be successful in many dimensions to get that happening. I don't see how that happens, but if somebody out there thinks that they want to try and do it for free, I think this patient might be interested. Let me know, but this is not something I would tackle whatsoever. Enough said about the hopeless number 19. So then what do you do with the upper? Since this then gets cut out, we're now looking at the extraction here, right? So this is going to go away. And let's look at that tooth here a little closer on the CT and the slice view. And here's what we have. Here's the problem. Our facial plate is very thin, and we have also a sinus involvement right towards the tip of the apex of the root. So you're going to want to graft this site for sure and try to preserve the bone. I don't remember, but I do know that there was a failure up here, and I'm not sure if that doctor did a graft or not. I'd have to look at my notes to see, but this is not a site that you want to leave ungrafted. I like the ridge width. I think that's okay, and I think the height isn't too bad either. And so you could do something pretty straightforward here. But the funny part here is that you got this shoulder where you just drop off completely. So let me get rid of some of these measurements here. I don't know if you could see this, but it goes, the sinus goes here and then just drops. There's a little, there's a septum here, right here, bone, and then it just drops down into that first molar area here. So as you go back, more distal across the root, it becomes nothing. See, your bone becomes very nothing. So very difficult to deal with this area, but we have no 19, so we don't have to worry about that area, right? So we're only looking at a premolar occlusion. So if I could get back something here to here, then I'm good. So let's look at that site. So you would graft this site, and then on this site, the bone density is poor as well, and so you're going to have to do compression. And the reason why I say it's poor is because the grayscale is showing me that it's very similar in density to the tissue outside of it, which tells me that's not a lot as much as you see the gray here. Don't be fooled. This is just a density measurement, and if your density measurement of your palate tissue looks exactly the same as the density measurement of the bone, you got a problem. That also means, look at down here. You can even compare it to the lower. Here you see some medullary bone, and this is this crazy shelf that we've got of a constriction right by the nerve on the bottom area. So that's another nutty area to be warned about. So I don't have much of constriction here, but I have this crazy constriction here. So that's why I gave it a yellow. I'm not worried about this because I'm not thinking about an implant here, but I am here, so I'm okay with the yellow idea on the constriction because it's not site-specific on my little chart. So think about that. Look at the density. Look at the density. Compare the two densities. You know this is soft, so this is going to be just as soft. So getting bone here, hoping that an implant is successful, it's a bit of a challenge. It's definitely a bit of a challenge. So hopefully she doesn't have any medical history issues that you have to worry about, but that's how this could be restored. This patient is also, on top of it, of all this stuff, is very vain. And so this bridge that was cut out, she wants this back in. Regardless of an implant here, an implant here, she doesn't care about the hygiene as much as I tell her that now it becomes less hygienic and can put these implants into jeopardy. If we get them to be successful, she still doesn't care. She wants a tooth going off 2 implants here, so when she smiles, there's no gap. This tooth is still there. This tooth is still there. So that's fine as long as you don't have now a diving board, coming off these 2 implants that you don't want to lose and sacrifice due to biomechanics. I don't think we're going to have a problem because there's nothing there to chew against. So let's look at this site over here, a recent extraction site. Unfortunately, it was not grafted, and that, might have led to something here more positive. But you can see how very thin that facial bone ended up. The density looks pretty good in the bone here, but there's absolutely nothing here, and there's a fenestration here in that site. So that's, I don't know, 2 months old. I hope to see more bone grow in there, but that's just the way it is. Look at how the bottom constriction is. If she loses any teeth on the bottom, you for sure need to graft and make sure you maintain that width distance because she just doesn't have anything going on there. So the upper is where we got to worry about. Thank God we're not worrying about the bottom, and that makes life a little bit easier. Unfortunately, this bottom area is a site that is not valid anymore, but it helps this situation for the cosmetic reasons that she wants, and I don't really have that much of a problem. This area here, I would probably recommend a 3-unit bridge, or I guess she wants to wait for the implant, and I hope that she is able to develop bone over the next 4 months or 3 months, I guess, at this stage on this one, to have some sort of bone fill there. She doesn't grow a lot of bone. She doesn't have a lot of heavy bone, so I don't predict that she's going to develop and grow bone in this edentulous site all that well. So this may be a curious scenario down the road. But like I said, this case is going to be a follow-up case, and we'll be looking at that later in the future to see where this is, because this case is at least 3 to 5 years old or something. So follow this case in the follow-up case studies of what we're doing, so you can subscribe to our case studies and you can figure out if that works for you, or just follow us on YouTube and subscribe. Follow us on Facebook and look for our live streams. If you have any questions or comments, please post them. If not, go to our live stream and then we can do a little chat there too. So awesome. Thanks for joining and thanks for watching.